to Stranded in Pittsburgh. Intro went a little better than I thought there, turning that music down manually. I'm a little out of practice. It's Nate, it's Nick, back at it once again after an unplanned hiatus of like a month. We thought things were going to slow down in the freelancing world, and they might have gotten busier actually. But anyway, great to be back. What a show! We were just going to do a little recap of everything that we've missed over the past few weeks, and then I'm out taking a walk with my wife after work, and my phone lights up and it says Paul Skenes set to make a debut on Saturday. So that's going to be the meat of this show this week, but we got a lot more to talk about. Steelers had their draft the time that we were gone, so we'll be breaking that down a little bit. And then Nate, just before we started recording, was putting pen to paper on some Penguins things he wants to touch light on here, and some other material might come up as well. You never know where those side conversations are going to go. But hope you're doing well. Glad to have you with us here, and bear with us if we start stuttering like goofballs as we try to remember how to talk into microphones. But Nate, it's good to see you again. Haven't talked to you in a while. How's life?
It's been good. It's been a minute, man. A little disappointed Ethan couldn't join us tonight, but I'm glad it's you and I just chatting about some Pittsburgh sports. Just so much to talk about and a lot of news to break down, especially with Paul Skenes and the Steelers.
Yeah, for sure. NFL draft, man, it came and went in a blur. It felt like I was getting really excited. All those little pre-draft stories you hear about the Steelers are going to take someone in this position group. They're not going to take someone in this position group. And then another air quote credible source completely flips the script and tells you the opposite. So NFL draft coverage is always fun to listen to. And then Pirates, as frustrating as they might be, they always find a way to stay relevant all year long. And they went all out today with their big one. They had that pocket aces right there waiting for them all season long. When were they going to call up Paul Skenes? And they've decided May 11th is going to be the day of his first start against the Cubs. Obviously, a lot to touch on here. There were people upset he wasn't on the roster from day one. There were people assuming he would get called up in June so they could manipulate the service time a little bit more. But nonetheless, it's going to happen here on May 11th, as I just said, against the Cubs, a divisional rival. A game that I think could be winnable, but the way they're hitting, who knows if that's giving them a little too much credit. But Nate, just your knee-jerk reaction here to hearing this is happening barely a month into the season.
Well, obviously, it's big time news for the Pirates. Probably the most hyped up debut from a pitcher since obviously in Pirates history with Garrett Cole, which was already over 10 years ago, which is mind-boggling to think of. Because I remember watching that debut plain as day at a buddy's house against the Giants, and he had a couple hits to go along with the pitching debut. But probably since Steven Strasburg has been the talk, like this is the biggest generational pitcher we're going to see or should see. And obviously it's super exciting, and it's important for the Pirates to get him involved. And you knew they weren't going to waste much time with letting him sit in the minors because, I mean, what else can he do? Obviously, they were raising the pitch count as the season has progressed so far. But he's done enough to show that he's ready to come up. So it was just a matter of time. And what a better way than to bring him up against the Cubs, obviously a rivalry type game, and really a point in the season where you need to get back on track. And it's not really been the starting pitching, though. Like the starting pitching's been relatively solid. Obviously some kinks in the armor there a bit, but Jared Jones has been outstanding, especially with the strikeout rate that he's rolling out right now. Mitch Keller's been a little topsy-turvy, but think about that three-man punch right there if they all pitch to their potential. Paul Skenes, number one overall, supposed to be this generational talent of an arm, guy who tops 100 miles per hour so often when he's throwing, has worked on some other pitches that he's going to bring into the arsenal. Then the way Jared Jones has started off with the Pirates and only being drafted a few years ago as well. So, and then you throw Mitch Keller, 3 homegrown Pirates pitchers. I mean, when was the last time you could say that has happened? Even when Garrett Cole pitched, I don't know. He might have been the only starter that was technically like a homegrown Pirates guy. So this is big for the Pirates, and it's whether or not this is all going to pan out and pay off about their development, and that's been the question mark for all these years since the 90s. They just haven't been able to develop guys the way they wanted to. Obviously, they got lucky, not lucky maybe, but like you got guys like Andrew McCutcheon and Pedro and Walker that came up in that era, and then you bought some pitchers to be successful. But now you're like, this is a very, very homegrown team with a lot of Pirates prospects, whether they were traded in but made their way up through the minor leagues, and now they're here. This is it. I mean, this is it. And obviously the bats have struggled. So hopefully Paul Skenes can maybe come in, bring some energy to this team, and hopefully that correlates and translates into the bats as well.
Yeah, and I loved that point that you kind of ended on there with the homegrown aspect of this. This is a team where everyone and their mother was saying, "You get one more guy, a veteran arm, and I feel much better about this rotation." They got their guys, Martin Perez, and people are like, "Really? That's our big signing for this rotation this year?" They didn't get that kind of household name that, maybe even in like a Liriano case where maybe he wasn't at his peak anymore, but he's still a reliable three guy you can throw in there, and he's a big name where you go, okay, they did that with Aroldis Chapman of all people. That's the big name guy they put on the mound there. And okay, whatever. But that only works if this pans out. And what you said in developing talent, this is a team that we've heard them say, we got Paul Skenes coming up. We've had Quinn Priester come up last year, Jared Jones. They have, Bubba Chandler, Anthony Solometto. They got all these guys in the wire waiting to come up, waiting to, hit their stride and be major league ready. And now it's time for them to all kind of get that opportunity or get close to grabbing that brass ring and showing what they can do on the MLB stage. And Paul Skenes is the biggest one, how's he going to do? And that's what we're going to find out here on Saturday. Obviously, there have been some concerns brought up with this maneuver. I think DK said, this is a distraction. Hey, look over here because we're not going to do anything about the hitting. And that's a very fair point to bring up because if you followed anything online, any of the discourse about the Pirates right now, the hitting is lackluster, and that's put easier to say a lot more about the hitting than describing it as lackluster. But that is kind of where they're at right now. This is a team that needs to fix it at the plate. And while that noise is perhaps at its loudest it's been so far in this young season, they go, hey, we're bringing up the guy everyone, not even in Pittsburgh, but everyone in the baseball world has been waiting to see get called up to the majors. So, yeah, that's interesting timing. And then there's people bringing up the concerns on, well, this guy doesn't even average 4 innings an outing at AAA. He's barely thrown 75 pitches. I think once he's thrown 75 pitches and what have you. But Paul Skenes has been going nonstop. A year ago, he was at LSU, and by the end of last season, he had already accumulated some time in Double A and Altoona there. He's been going nonstop. He had a good spring. He's done a phenomenal job this year so far. And at a certain point, you don't want him to just be sitting there in AAA spinning his tires. Put him up here. Let's see what he can do. Can he bring a spark to this team? Obviously, his spark right now might not last all the way into the dog days of summer and help them make a run to maybe reach that potential some people thought they could get to this year. But they are definitely in the need of a pick-me-up right now. And I don't see an issue with them doing things the way they have done things. And it's easy to be critical of the Pirates and nitpick every little thing they do. But I think him up now before all the wind is out of this team's sails, when getting back to 500 is something you can do with one series sweep where you take 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 against another team or two and you're right back there playing 500 ball. So I'm excited. I hear the noise and I think some of it's very valid, but at the same time, let's go. We got Jared Jones as a huge surprise. Obviously, there were some pretty decent expectations with him, but there's the debate. Is he going to be put on this starting rotation to begin the year? And he's panned out and then some. Had a really good outing his last time out there, and he got no freaking run support, which has been a common trend as of late to once again take a dig at the hitting. But like you said, Nate, with Jones doing that well, with Mitch Keller, again, he's had some dings in the armor so far, but just got that complete game. This could be an exciting little run here in this rotation. And do they run with a 6-man lineup for now in that rotation, or do they send someone down? Is Quinn Priester, maybe Bailey Falter on the chopping block? Do they let them all get a run through and, whoever's the hot hand at the moment they keep and whoever's not they send down? Those are questions that will be answered hopefully in the coming weeks. And I just hope it's infectious that I'm excited. I'm excited to see what Paul Skenes and the power of that mustache can bring here to the 4-1-2.
And, sort of to go along that point about you being excited for this, I mean, Pirates fans are so eager for success. Like they just want it to happen, and everybody does, from top to bottom. And there needs to be some patience with Paul Skenes because, again, I mean, he did spend a couple years in the collegiate ranks and quickly rose through um, the minor leagues as expected. But there's going to be times where he is going to struggle for sure. I mean, no one's going to go out there and he's not going to have a .5 ERA through his first 10 starts. That's just not going to happen. So I hopefully with this move, and hopefully he doesn't blow up and where he actually is not that good. Because again, with the way the Pirates have developed players, you never know what could happen. But Pirates fans need to be patient
Hmm.
because first thing first in first start on Saturday, everyone's been joking about it. They're expecting like a 1-0 game with the Pirates coming up on the losing end, and Skenes goes whatever 6 full and like strikes out 10, but he gets no run support because that's just the way things have been going, which very well could happen. But who knows? I mean, he could go one or two good starts, and then he can have a start that just blows up in his face. And I mean, it's going to be expected a little bit, especially with a young player like Skenes. But Pirates fans have to be patient. They can't just, you know, blow up themselves and, think the sky's falling because Skenes has one or two bad games. Because Jared Jones has already had a game or two here and there. Mitch Keller on this big contract has had a game two here and there, and then he goes and throws a complete game just a couple days ago. It's going to happen. It's a long season. It's this what we're in the first week of May, second week going into the second week of May. Like it's a long season, and I think the Pirates are going to be in contention for potentially a wild card spot once they go into September, which we haven't said since
Hmm.
probably 2017. So people need to be patient with these pitchers. Now you can talk all about the hitting you want because there is a big time issue right now with the hitting. Um, Obviously, Henry Davis was fairly disappointing after the way he performed in spring training. O'Neal Cruz has been struggling at the plate, but starting to get some extra base hits again. Um, there's a lot to worry about on the hitting end. And again, trying to maybe distract from what Andy Haynes is doing, and maybe his job could be on the line here in the next month if they don't turn things around. But there's a lot to be excited about, but fans have to be patient with the way Paul Skenes develops up in the big leagues because he's getting thrown in where he's not going to get probably a ton of run support right now. But as things go, and again, the point I wanted to come back to was we talked about he hasn't thrown a ton of innings. Well, only 27 innings, I think, in AAA this year. But the good thing is, though, if they are competitive, they will have Skenes down the line because everyone knows already, obviously, with the Jared Jones situation a few weeks ago where he was pulled after a strong performance, but they're going to be on inning limits. They're going to be on pitch limits. That's just how it's going to be. And so that Paul Skenes didn't overthrow in the minors. Now he's ready and could be with this Pirates team going into September where they're competitive.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Paul Skenes, as you mentioned, there is it is going to be frustrating if he's getting hung with losses if he gives up 3 or 4 runs when he's still trying to figure it out, and that's I think something that I like to think he knows coming into this, and he's kind of preparing himself to be let down in that regard, where it's not going to bother him too bad. But to grab onto that last point you made there, if he gets through that and keeps his head without letting it completely derail his mentality for this season, and they get to a point where they're winning ball games and they're playing meaningful baseball as the summer goes on, that's going to be huge. If he's up to speed, he's ready, he's proven by that point. And I think that's the big thing that you're doing here by calling him up right now. Let him get that frustration out. We're assuming he's going to be pissed off the first couple months of the season. What a positive outlook to have. But, let him deal with these. I don't know if growing pains is the right terminology, but let him deal with it. The bats are cold right now. Maybe he gets a few stupid losses to begin the season where he doesn't give up too many runs and what have you. Maybe he gets some of those blow up outings where he gives up 6, 7 runs, gets him out of his system, realizes how to bounce back from that at the major league level and get your head and go out the next outing and do better. Let him get through all that right now. And then if everything does start to click, guys do reach their potential, get out of these slumps, what have you. They throw Haynes, off the Clemente Bridge and into the Allegheny. Whatever they do to fix the bats, once that all starts clicking, Paul Skenes is there. He's ready. He's game tested to help this team win when it matters. So we're going to see what happens Saturday when we do this next week. If we can record next week, hopefully we're saying good things about the weekend as opposed to negativity and saying, oh, dear God, this is a Quinn Priester situation where things are kind of going off the rails and you're not sure if he's going to be as advertised at all now because, man, I had high hopes for Quinn Priester and you don't want to give up. And I know he's had some shining moments, but I'm a little worried about Quinn being the way he was described coming up in this system. But you know what? We're going to be positive. Everyone else is being negative. I just yelled at ourselves for being so negative, but we're going to try to keep a little bit of a positive spin on this thing. But there we go. The big Pirate talking point. We were going to talk about their slumping bats, but instead we got talked about one of the best prospects in baseball coming up to the North Shore over the weekend. Speaking of weekends, about 2 weekends from now, Stranded Sports Open going to be taking place in Butler, PA, benefiting Make-A-Wish. Going to be a good time. 2-person scramble, a few spots left, a bunch of maybes. So I keep opening it up for more people to join if they want to. A lot of maybes hanging in the balance right now. But yeah, you want to participate? Shoot me an email, nickhedrick13 at gmail.com. That's going to scroll around at the bottom of your screen right about now as well. So you want to play, hit some golf balls? I can't tell you Nate's going to be there. Unfortunately, he'll be down south enjoying the sun, maybe getting a tan for those who can't, like myself. But going to be a great event. Jack and myself will be there, and some pretty cool prizes, including some baseball tickets. Got some Pirates tickets we're going to be raffling off. Some Erie Seawolves tickets we're going to be raffling off for those coming down from my hometown or those who want to go up to my hometown for some reason. We're going to be raffling some of those off and some other great prizes as well. And you can get a trophy if you win, not if you lose. We don't give trophies to losers around here, but going to be a good time. Good times were also had in Detroit. The Steelers, pretty damn good draft. Consensus is the Steelers had a good draft. Hard to find someone detracting the way they were drafting out there. But yeah, Nate, I love this. They hunkered down on the offensive line. Herbig's not going to be the center now that Mason Cole's gone, which there was some I don't know if it's just call it a rumor, but there was some genuine concern that was the thing. They were going to bulk up on other aspects of things. Sorry, my phone was just tweaking on my desk and it totally derailed my train of thought. But they address the center needs. They go out there and, bulk up that offensive line, go out and get a receiver. Would have liked maybe a little more on the secondary, on the defensive side, maybe address that a little earlier than when they did in the draft. But I'm not going to sit here. I want to be positive, I guess, is the overall theme of this episode. I'm going to be positive rather than needlessly negative. That can be for the Penguin segment. But yeah, I love this draft.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned sort of during that spiel, that you can only do so much with a handful of picks in the draft. So there are going to be some area needs that you just don't really pick up on. Obviously, the secondary, you only get Ryan Watson with the last pick from Texas, and that's a safety. So obviously there's some holes and gaps still there if the Steelers can plug in. But who knows at that point, don't know if you can hear my dogs freaking out in the background. Anyways, but yeah, for sure the Steelers attacked that offensive line, and honestly, you might have to help me with the pronunciation still. Don't have it down pat, but Troy Fautanu.
I've heard Fautanu.
Fautanu. Okay.
But I've also heard Fautanu, so I'm not sure.
I mean, the biggest thing is a lot of people were projecting him much higher than where he was selected, and for him to fall into 20 was exactly where the Steelers wanted. As God damn it, got dogs.
Is Ethan trying to break into your house? Does he want to talk about Paul Skenes?
Maybe he might be here. It's like the
I know your dog hates Ethan.
Well, we're watching my sister's dog too, so we got a beagle howling down there. So, anyways, no, I don't think it's Ethan.
That's a shame.
I heard where'd you say he was working? The Big Bird?
He was working at the Big Bird today, doing those finances. Said he might try to call in on a break, but not looking too good for him thus far as we're 2/3 of the way through the show.
We're talking about everything that he would love to talk about, too. We got Skenes and Steelers draft.
He would go on a good 8-minute Ethan rant about any of this, and I feel like we're getting screwed out of phenomenal podcast content. But
well, either way, You shore up that offensive line. And again, there's going to be, you got to build the chemistry on that line in front of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. But now you have the chance because Faltanu, I know, obviously at the tackle position, him and Broderick Jones going to shore up those tackle spots is important for the Steelers because you drafted those guys. And obviously, Broderick Jones was thrown around here and there with Dan Moore, obviously getting time, but Dan Moore now is going to be in the reserve spot. And now you have Faltanu and Jones there at the tackle. And then we talked about it a lot about the center position. And we were like, I was harping pretty big on it that the Steelers need to attack that and get in and land a center in the first round because you did not know if Frazier was still going to be there and the Oregon guy was still going to be there. But as the weeks inched closer to the draft day, all of a sudden the center position, the stock was falling, and the Steelers were able to select their guy, which they had visited with Zach Frazier, I think, a couple of times, and they got their guy right down 79 from West Virginia. So we'll see how that works out because obviously a good chunk of West Virginia fans are Steelers fans, and the last time a recent local college team had a guy picked, we all saw how that went, and he's no longer on the team. I guess 2 drafts ago because you had Joey Porter Jr. obviously from Penn State, but I think there's been a lot of high grades for the Steelers from their guys that they've picked in terms of when you look round by round with Roman Wilson, with Peyton Wilson, to go along with Russell Wilson there, the little trio you got. But the biggest thing, though, obviously you went after the offensive line and you shored that up, which was so important because now you can protect your quarterback. Hopefully things work out with those young guys. But would have liked the Steelers, again, secondary, and maybe gone after a wide receiver if they could. But the goal was to get those 2 offensive linemen. Roman Wilson seems like he's going to be a good slot guy for the Steelers, hence why the Steelers didn't get a chance to really land Tyler Boyd. Because now the Steelers have, 5 different random wide receivers on their team, along with George Pickens. So the wide receiver room is still questionable. And now you bring in Scotty Miller off of free agency. But Wilson getting a lot of praise off of this, Roman Wilson. Then also Peyton Wilson. Good linebacker selection, can help out the linebacker unit. So all in all, I thought this draft was pretty solid. Now, again, it's so early. We have to see how things roll into the first couple of weeks of the season. We'll figure out how things are looking there. But, to go along with last draft class and this class, Omar Khan has put together some solid groups. So, again, Steelers are a team that really doesn't do a full-on rebuild, and they're rebuilding on the fly. And we'll see how things have worked. They have done so much in this offseason and free agency. And now with this draft to go along with it, they should be right back competitive again. Because, again, as you mentioned, Nick, multiple people calling it a top 5, top 3 draft class amongst all 32 teams in the NFL.
All I really took from that is you don't think Scotty Miller is really worthy of deeming their big name receiver signing of the year. And that's a little offensive to Arthur Smith. No. Well, Arthur Smith brings in a who's who of random guys from Atlanta that he can convince to move up to Pittsburgh. I did want to touch on the draft one more time. And as you said, Nate, this is a really good draft class, which is also what the consensus has been, which is what we've been getting at this entire time. And we hear about, the Steeler way a lot. And it's kind of this weird adage that I think people kind of are conflicted on in these times. Like the Steeler way is what's held them back and kind of made them content in being a 500-ish club these last few years instead of adapting with the times and what have you. But you look at the quality of people that you've seen in this draft from what we've seen in their interviews and stuff. And it's really exciting. Frazier is a dog from West Virginia there, as you said, down 79. Faltanu, his dream was to play for the Steelers. And he's going to live out that dream. And he has sounded and come off as incredibly humble in pretty much every interview I've heard from him. Peyton Wilson has dealt with what was it, ACL or MCL injuries before?
ACL, yeah. Yep.
And he's still there, still a good mid-round pick for this team, plays with his heart on his sleeve. They are drafting some guys that I think can help kind of usher in that revitalization of the Steeler way. And I know obviously that's rich to say because in all those NFL draft interviews and stuff, there's the famous Bill Burr skit where everyone goes up there and thanks their God and is just so grateful to be playing in whatever city drafts them and whatnot. But on paper, these look like some really level-headed guys, really genuinely good people who just want to go out there and play the sport that they play and, just lift the guys up around them and help achieve that common goal of bringing a Super Bowl back to the Steel City. Did want to touch on that receiving core a little bit more. The Tyler Boyd thing kind of fizzled out. I don't know how close they ever were. I think that was one of those things where everyone was like, "Oh, the hometown discount. He's going to come back to Pittsburgh, and it's going to be a great time." Hee hee ha ha. So I don't know how close that ever actually was to being realized. But that kind of felt at times like it was a slam dunk, just waiting to happen for this Pittsburgh team. But instead, we've gotten Van Jefferson, that Watkins guy from Philadelphia, and Cordell Patterson, the kick return, running back, wide receiver, Swiss Army knife of skill set. I don't know how I feel about this receiving core. To be completely honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan of Deontay Johnson. I'm not a Deontay Johnson apologist. I've been heavily critical of him before, but to get rid of your WR1 and get a secondary defensive back as the return and maybe a random draft pick. I can't remember who all was involved in that trade. And this was your plan for, replacing him and beefing up the receiving core after he's gone. That's a very rare Omar Khan miss. Usually he's cooking. He forgot to put some oil in the pan before that one, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and see what happens here. But that's really the only red flag I've seen so far with this Steelers team. Again, I couldn't be happier with what they've done with the offensive line. Herbig's not going to be in there. They got rid of Mason Cole. They got Frazier. And of course, people were on Twitter, why don't you draft Jackson Powers Johnson? Or I think that was the Oregon guy. And people are always going to complain. They're always going to prefer one guy over the other. But I love the Frazier pick. And the center position is what I've kind of been most worried about with that offensive line's needs. Because at the end of the day, it didn't matter if they have Russell Wilson, Kenny Pickett, Shane Falco, whoever they want to throw back there. You don't have a good line, it's not going to matter. But I think they've done a good job of giving Russell Wilson that chance come September of being able to lead this team efficiently down the field here.
And I know we can talk about it, obviously, on future episodes as we go through the offseason and have topics to bring up. But, talking about the wide receiver group and, how questionable it is and what they've put together. But I think the biggest thing is they're going as offense by committee, I think, here. There's not really one person that's really going to stand out for the Steelers offense. And I think that's a little bit of an Arthur Smith calling card. He tries to utilize as much as everyone he can. So tight ends with Freiermuth, wide receivers with the unit that they've put together. But also you have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who are guys that can scramble if need be. Both a little bit dual threat, maybe Fields more than Wilson, especially with Wilson's age. But that's the big thing about shoring up that offensive line is when you get guys that are not only, better than what you had, but also Fautanu is a smaller guy, but also a little bit more quick on the line. And so is obviously Frazier. That can open up things for Wilson and Fields in your run game to go along with maybe a receiving core that's not going to be one of the best in the league this year. So it's going to be, I think, a really big offense by committee this year where they're going to have to use everything, pull all the strings you can, especially with these younger guys on the line where there's going to be, again, don't want to throw out the term because I feel like we use it all the time, but growing pains. I mean, there's going to be that with these guys. But it's going to be interesting how they all come together and mesh together once the season comes around because they got some good picks. And obviously year one's going to be we're going to see what happens. Hopefully there's not a 2-year leash like there was on some other guys, but we'll see how things pan out. And I'm sure we'll talk about it much more throughout the offseason.
Yeah, and I don't hate that. This Steelers offense has felt very predictable these last few years. So I don't hate the idea of them accumulating some of these guys. Do I think that all of them have been necessary? No, not a chance. But I don't have a problem with them maybe doing new things, coming at you with different weapons at different times in different situations, within reason. Within reason. We don't need to be running random plays designed for Connor Hayward like we saw last year. And that's nothing against Connor Hayward. I think he's going to be a very valuable asset to this team. But we don't need to be seeing random names getting called at random points. Uh, I think it needs to make sense as opposed to what we've seen these past couple of years. If you're going to do something different, don't make it the third tight end on your depth chart. Make it make a little more sense. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they bring to the table, and maybe come October, if they're like 0-4 to start the year, I'll change my tune a little bit. But for right now, the thought of something new is very exciting, and they're bringing in new faces to try and usher in that kind of new wave. So we'll see what happens. We got a long time to wait, but it's going to be here before we know it. Right now, we're saying it's a long time away, but we're going to be giving our thoughts on this pretty soon here, live and in action. But speaking of action, very, very bad transition. I apologize. Action on the ice is done in Pittsburgh. I really stuck with it there. Penguins very close to sneaking into the playoffs. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be. But in the end, the Capitals got bounced pretty early too, so it didn't really. There's that self satisfaction there. But Nate, just your thoughts on the way this season ended, season as a whole, maybe, and anything else you wanted to hit here. The floor, thankfully for all the listeners, is yours.
Put a lot of pressure on me here, but um, I think the biggest thing was, I mean, we basically said the season was over in the first week of March, and look how things ended, where they were still in the race until the second to last day of the season. So there's one thing to be said about that, and I think a lot of that credit obviously has to go to the captain and Sidney Crosby and the way he sort of put the team on his back. And then they started to play as a collective much better in the last 2 weeks. I got a chance to go to some of those games late in the season versus the Predators and the Red Wings, and they were exciting games. They kept the fans flowing into PPG Paints Arena and kept people interested, which I think obviously in terms of a marketing tactic, that's huge. So that's one thing. They kept people coming to the games, but they were exciting. And, you know, there could be something to be said about, okay, if they make the playoffs, what type of run can they go on? You never know when you make it into the postseason. But I think things would have ended up pretty similarly to the way the Capitals did. Maybe the Pens win 2 games in a series versus the Rangers, but the way the Rangers are playing, I mean, they're looking really good. Already up 2-0 against the Hurricanes in the second round series, which I think whoever comes out of that series may be the Eastern Conference representative in the Stanley Cup Finals, which is, again, you're looking at another series in Boston and Florida. They're 2 good teams. So, I mean, the playoffs they're pretty solid. They've been fun to watch. But for the Penguins' sense, it's going to be a very intriguing off season, and obviously the offense is going to be one to be looking at because there's a lot of movement that could happen there. And I think the biggest thing is the first move that was made is Todd Reardon's out the door. No longer the power play coach, no longer on the Penguins coaching staff, but that has also opened up. And since basically the season came close, there's been a lot of rumors swirling about what's Mike Sullivan's future. And I think Tim Benz wrote an article. I didn't get a chance to read it, but I mean, the basic idea was that these Pittsburgh teams need to quit using their assistant coaches as scapegoats, and that maybe it is time for some of these head coaches, hence Mike Tomlin and Mike Sullivan, the 2 Mikes in town. Yeah, I mean, maybe it is, I want to say overdue, but maybe it's just time that Sullivan needs to go because I mean, he had a philosophy when he first came in that speed was the name of the game, and they adjusted to it, and they won 2 Stanley Cups. Obviously, he inherited teams, but from a bad coach and Mike Johnston. But he had found a successful formula, and now at this point, it's just not working, and he's just stuck in his ways for some reason. And I think maybe it is time just for a new, fresh voice to give you at least one last chance with some of these guys in terms of Letang and Malkin and Crosby and Carlson. But in terms of the offseason ahead, they don't have a first-round pick again. because they didn't get the first overall selection. So that pick goes to San Jose in terms of the Carlson trade. The only reason they would get a first rounder is if the Hurricanes make the Stanley Cup final. So realistically, you're going to have to rebuild through free agency on the fly again, sort of how the Steelers are doing. And the Pens don't have a ton of people, though, that are hitting the market in terms of big names. The only, the biggest one probably is Alex Nedeljkovic, which, if in my opinion, I think they should resign Nedeljkovic and some way, somehow find an option to trade Tristan Jarry. We talked about it a little bit during the deadline a couple of months ago, but I think Nedeljkovic has proven himself that he could be a starter, and you go out and you find someone very similar to Nedeljkovic that can be a backup or a fringe starter and for cheaper money. But again, the whole thing is Dubas signed Jarry to a contract that's not very favorable, that teams aren't going to pick up much on. So that's good. That's one thing. Obviously, the goaltending situation is important to look at. But there's some guys elsewhere, unrestricted free agents. Pustinen's on there. Ryan Shea. Jansen Harkins, he can go. He's disposable. Zahorna can go. Good thing is Jeff Carter, he retires, so that opens up a spot on that fourth line. So there's a lot to add there. A couple restricted free agent guys, Emil Bemstrom, P.O. Joseph, Poland, St. Ivany. I think most of those guys would be back, should be back. Maybe P.O. Joseph, see what you can do with him. Could potentially be disposable as well, but there's a lot to do this offseason to rebuild around Crosby and Malkin. And obviously things started with Jake Gensel, and there's some of the prospects they got in that deal could potentially be up next year, but there's a lot to do. I think the third and fourth line needs a good retool. And like I said, Harkins, no need for him to be back. Zahorna, no need for him to be back. Carter, good. He's done, so you don't have to worry about him. And I don't think they were going to bring him back anyways if he would not have retired. So, a lot to work on those third and fourth lines. And realistically, I think the defense stays pretty much the same. And the only person that would be hopefully if you can move him is Ryan Graves, because he really was disappointing this year. And maybe you give him another year to sort of correct things. But I don't know. He just was not that good. And I don't know if you could keep him and if he's going to do much better next year. But really, the focus is goaltending, your bottom six, and who knows? Mike Sullivan might be out the door, so you're looking at a new coach.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jake Edsel's going to come back too. That's what everyone told me when they were just going to loan him off to Carolina. That was wishful thinking. Apparently, he loves in Carolina based off what I've seen so far. Again, I don't have any hockey sources, but you read things and it sounds like, he loves it down there, surprisingly, and he's having a good time. Who wouldn't want to be in that weather compared to Pittsburgh? But yeah, I think it was kind of that wishful thinking thing with Jake Gensel coming back to Pittsburgh after going on a little cup chase there in Carolina. It's like if your girl says, we got to go on a break for a little bit, just for a little bit. And then, you go on Snapchat and you see she's with the girls in Miami on a boat somewhere, you're like, oh, maybe this is done. Don't think this is going to happen. I mean, it stinks, but Jake did his time here, and now it's time to kind of find that other. I don't think calling him a needle in a haystack is fair, but I mean, you got to find someone to kind of make up for that production that he brought. We hammered this over and over again, like Tim the Toolman Taylor. That's a hard find to find someone that can replace one person as opposed to two, maybe 2.5, 3 people that can do what Jake Gensel did there, given his role. But I mean, they're going to have to find a way to make up for that. And then, as you brought up too, the Nedeljkovic storyline is something I'm heavily invested on. I mean, we're looking at a meaningless last game of the season. Jari's allegedly healthy, and they still put Nedeljkovic in net. It's not even a case of let's ride the hot hand anymore. And even calling him the hot hand at times was rich because he did have some very lackluster performances down the stretch there, and they still turned to him. So what's that tell you about their thoughts on Tristan Jarry right now? So that's going to be a storyline that I'm keeping my eyes on too. And I'm as casual as it gets. So if me as a casual fan could be worried about that, I can only imagine what the diehards are thinking about that situation right now. So definitely something to watch as the summer goes along here. And I love NHL playoff hockey more than any other playoffs in the world. Let me just tell you right now, I leapt out of my chair when I saw that goal go in against Toronto. That was so funny. I know Boston's not a favorite team of mine. My dad roots for Boston, though. So when they're not playing Pittsburgh, I usually find myself supporting them. And the Toronto memes, man, they live on forever. And watching that goal go in on Marner being a little lackadaisical, chasing in there, following that puck after it got dumped in, that was pretty enjoyable. Pretty enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, the playoffs have been awesome. This is the first year in a couple years where I've really tuned in to a lot of the games as much as possible, and yet they've been exciting. Um, yeah, there's a part of me, and maybe it's because we grew up in Pittsburgh and we're spoiled, and you want the accolades for Crosby, and maybe he doesn't get the respect as the greatest player of all time as maybe he should. But I think there's something to be said, and it's a funny to think about when Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid lose and get bounced out of the playoffs, because there's talks about these guys being this generational, the top players in the NHL, but the biggest goal out of all of it is to win the Stanley Cup, and the fact that Toronto just pours all this money, and don't want to talk too much about it because Kyle Dubas is now GM of the Penguins. You don't know what he's going to do next, but like, so much money into these guys and they can't get it done. So I don't know. The playoffs have been good, and it is quite funny to see constantly the Bruins take care of the Leafs.
Absolutely. NBA playoffs have been a lot of fun too. Really enjoyed watching them. Excited to see if Jokic and the Nuggets can kind of bounce back here. Anthony Edwards playing off his mind, off his rocker, out of his mind. There we go. But yeah, gonna be excited to see what happens there. And can the Celtics finally eliminate the Cavs? I know when they had issues with that before, LeBron was on the Cavs, and there's no LeBron on the Cavs this year. There is that dog, Donovan Mitchell. Love watching him. So a lot of good things going on right now in the world of sports. I know Pirates are making these Pittsburgh fans a little, that's all we have right now. Go to a Riverhounds game if you want. They're a lot of fun to watch. And then while you're at it, watch these NBA and NHL playoffs because they're a blast. And before you know it, you'll be painting your face black and gold for going down and slamming some IC light and walking into Heinz Field because you're not going to call it Acrisure. But yeah, no last call today. That's Nate Breisinger. I'm Nick Hederick. This has been Stranded in Pittsburgh. We will see you next time.